Everybody joining me on the show today is Adam Spencer from Saturday Down South. We're going to talk all things SEC football here on the show today. And Adam, I appreciate you coming on.
Always a pleasure. Good to be back.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We were talking off air. We had planned to do some basketball talk on here a little bit, but we had to nix that because Sunday morning we all woke up to Jimbo Fisher's firing there at Texas A&M, and then on Monday morning we wake up to Zach Arnett being fired at Mississippi State. And I guess just jumping off. I guess it's not really a surprise with Jimbo Fisher, but when you win 51-10 the night before, you kind of don't expect to see that. But it obviously was something that had been in the works.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not a decision, with that kind of money that gets made quickly, and so I think that they've even said, this was a thing that was discussed last week, after a loss, but so I don't think he could have won 273-3, and I still think they would have fired him on Sunday. Just they just had to cross their T's, dot their I's, make sure that they had $76 million to give him, and because I think like 26 of that is due right away, pretty much. So yeah, and I mean 100 million plus when it comes to the buyouts of his staff and all that. So yeah, I think this was not a decision that was made following the result against Mississippi State, but it is still pretty jarring to see a coach who wins by 41 points let go the next day.
Yeah, hey, it takes a long time to move that $76 million around, so you could you get ready for a big buyout. Any surprise that maybe Bobby Petrino wasn't named interim instead of they did name Elijah Robinson the co-defense coordinator, but I'll be honest with you, as soon as it happened, I said, okay, obviously Bobby Petrino will be named the interim head coach, but they go with Robinson there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they made the right choice because my goodness, did Jimbo Fisher ever put together a trio of problematic ex-head coaches in Bobby Petrino, DJ Durkin, and Steve Addazio is there. So, I mean, you can't get much more controversial options. I mean, not Urban Meyer going to be there, and he's been in the mix in the rumors. Who else is going to be there? They're going to get Woody Hayes back in the mix here, after he punched one of his players. I mean, Bob Knight, I mean, RIP Bob Knight, but I mean, they just have all these guys who left their jobs disgraced and in the midst of controversy. So, I mean, Elijah Robinson is absolutely the right choice because, he's never been involved in a scandal like that, to my knowledge anyway. And, I just think that, you have to just get through these next 2 weeks. Like, is Bobby Petrino going to be the next head coach of the Aggies? No. So he doesn't need to audition for the job. Is DJ Durkin going to be the next head coach of the Aggies? No. Steve Addazio? No. So, I mean, give it to Elijah Robinson. Let him, let him show what he can do and maybe audition for, like Cadillac Williams did for a spot on Hugh Freeze's staff, like Greg Knox, who we'll talk about in a minute here, but Greg Knox, who is on his third stint as an interim head coach and his second interim stint at Mississippi State, let those guys take over, let them, build their reputations for future jobs and stuff like that. I think that Elijah Robinson was the right move. None of those other guys need an interim tag on them.
No. We all know all three of them are either going to be on Alabama or Georgia staff next year as an analyst anyway. So, there you go. Nick Saban probably said, "Ooh, I got some new analysts I can have next season."
That was Jimbo Fisher. Seemed like
That's
he was
another
trying
one.
to. Jimbo Fisher seemed like he was trying to start like his own version of the Nick Saban coaching rehab clinic, but he forgot the part where you're supposed to like rehab their images and get them set up for future jobs. So, yeah, we'll see how many of those guys make their way to Tuscaloosa to work with Saban next year.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see. It'll be funny to watch. With Jimbo Fisher, like I've never hit my feelings. I think he's an 8-4, 9-3 coach. You take away the 2 years he had Jameis Winston at Florida State. He needs to send some of his buyout money to Jameis Winston for making him as big as a head coach as he was. Because again, take that away, he's an average coach. In your opinion, though, why didn't it work?
He never got the quarterback position right, and I mean, for a guy who he's just really never had the quarterback position right outside of Jameis Winston. Like you said, he's had good quarterbacks. He hasn't had great quarterbacks outside of Jameis Winston. Jameis was a great great college quarterback. And I mean, he even had some years in the NFL where he was at least electric. He was maybe not consistent or elite, but man, watching him was fun. You know, it was like 40 touchdown, 30 interception year or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was, it was, he was entertaining, but, he never got the position right in College Station. Kellen Mond was a really good quarterback. He's not a great quarterback. Max Johnson's not an elite quarterback. He's a serviceable quarterback. Haynes King, even if he had been able to stay healthy, we're seeing now he's not an elite quarterback. Who was Nick Starkel was there for a little bit. I'm trying to think of who else. He's had some other guys there that just never, they were fine. They never really panned out. And I thought Connor Weigman was the guy. I was high on him. I thought it was such a shame to see him go down earlier this year because I had high hopes for him. But you got to get the quarterback position right. I mean, even now we were all down on Alabama earlier this year, and it was because their quarterback position was unsettled. Now they have a rising superstar in Jalen Milroe who's breaking records every week, it seems like, and we're all back in on Alabama all of a sudden. And so you have to get the quarterback position right, and he just didn't do it in College Station. You can bring in as many 5-star recruits as you want. If they don't work well as a team, and we've seen some of those guys transfer out already because they just, they were elite talent wise, but they weren't good team guys. And then combine that with not getting the quarterback position right, it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it is. It's just all the talent that he accumulated there too, and a lot of these quarterbacks were highly touted when they got there. But like I said, just in the developmental part, like you said, developing these quarterbacks. Out of Jameis Winston just hadn't done it. You see all the names. I remember as soon as I saw his name, I said, "Oh, Urban Meyer, is that a guy you could bring in?" And then of course I've already seen people mention Lane Kiffin, which I'm sure Ole Miss fans are like, "Okay, here we go again." What do you think is kind of like? I'm not going to ask you to give out a name that you think could be the next guy, but just kind of like realistic candidates that could probably be in the running for this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that Lane Kiffin is crazy. I think Urban Meyer is crazy. I think those rumors need to stop. Lane Kiffin has openly said many times that he wishes he had more money for NIL stuff. He's said he wishes he had better boosters. Well, I mean, you can't do much better than Texas A&M. They're willing to throw around $100 million just to get away from a coach that they don't like. So, I mean, Lane Kiffin, I know he said he doesn't want to do this again with the rumors and stuff, but that is definitely a name to keep an eye on at least. I won't believe that there's zero chance. I think there's a small chance that he goes. I won't believe that there's a 0% chance that he leaves Ole Miss for Texas A&M until Texas A&M hires somebody else. Jeff Traylor at UTSA is a good, safe pick. I don't think that Texas A&M fans would find that sexy, but I think he's done a heck of a job. Obviously Dan Lanning is a really good name. I don't know that he would want to leave Oregon for the mess at Texas A&M right now, especially with Oregon set to go to the Big Ten and get Big Ten money. I think that could be a big boost for the Oregon program as a whole, and Lanning might want to stay there. There's rumors of Kalen DeBoer. I think that those need to stop. He doesn't have the SEC footprint experience. He has no experience recruiting anywhere but out west. So, I don't think that he's a reasonable candidate. I think at this stage, any guy that comes into the SEC needs to have at least some connection from his past or where he grew up, or just anything that ties him to the SEC. And DeBoer doesn't have that. So, Lanning, Kiffin, Jeff Traylor is a good choice. Those are all guys that I would keep an eye on.
Just right there, and then we'll move on to Zach Arnett being fired on Monday. The Texas part of it, them coming into the conference, do you think that could actually be a deterrent for them landing somebody?
I think it's the opposite, really. I think if anything, just the money that Texas and Oklahoma are going to bring to the SEC, even more money. Just the two conferences to be in are going to be the SEC and the Big Ten. So anybody who can land a job in those conferences would be, frankly, foolish to not do so. If Oregon was staying in the Pac-12 this coming year, maybe Lanning becomes a much more interesting and strong candidate to take over at Texas A&M. But with that not being the case, the Ducks are going to the Big Ten where they're printing their own money too. I think he stays put because he's built a pretty solid situation there in Oregon. So we'll see how it all plays out. But yeah, I mean, I think if we're talking, I think they could poach pretty much anybody that they wanted outside of just a few names from the remaining Big 12, the ACC, just anywhere else that they wanted to. I just don't think that you're going to get a Big Ten head coach to jump over, or I don't think that you're going to get a sitting SEC head coach in a good situation. Lane Kiffin would be the one that I would have in mind, but I don't think that that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure if anybody that roots for Ole Miss is hearing this, oh great, we get to do this all over again if Lane starts getting mentioned again. And then we won't spend as much time on it, but Zach Arnett being fired at Mississippi State. You mentioned Greg Knox. He is the ultimate interim head coach. The second time doing it at Mississippi State, he did it at Florida. The first time he's not doing it with Dan Mullen, so I guess he's probably looking forward to that part of it. He's not following Dan Mullen, but 4-6, which I have not having Will Rogers most of the year obviously hurts. I mean, the offense was just not the same without him. But
But
kind
it
of
also wasn't the same with him, and that was, I think, the
mm.
problem. I think that more than anything was the problem. Sorry to cut you off there, but I
that's
think
where I was leading into it.
Okay.
Why it didn't work in that offense. That's so you kind of jumped on my question that I was already getting ready to ask you, because that was my feeling. I mean, I know every coach wants to have their own system, their own stamp on it, of course. But coming in, replacing the late great Mike Leach, I felt like it was a mistake to change the offense the way that he did. I felt like he probably should have brought somebody in that had a background in the air raid. No one is Mike Leach. No one's going to call a game like Mike Leach,
Right.
but try to stay as close to it as you could.
Especially while Will Rogers is there. I think, if you're going to change it, then change it once the air raid quarterback leaves. I don't get why he tried to change the system. Like you said, nobody's going to call the air raid like Mike Leach called the air raid, but you have an air raid quarterback in Will Rogers, and he's shown that he can put up huge numbers with that. And Mississippi State showed that it could win 8 games a year with that system in place, and that's pretty good at Mississippi State. Dan Mullen went like 10-2 one year, and that was like the best year that Mississippi State's ever had. Like, that's so if you can go 8-4 consistently, if you can make a bowl game every single year, if you can every now and then win 10 games, I mean, that's the ceiling in Starkville. I mean, Mississippi State fans might not want to hear that, but they're not gonna, barring like finding the next Nick Saban out of the blue, they're not going to become a dynasty team. They just don't have the booster money. They don't have the prestige. So, you settle for what Mike Leach brought to the table. You are thrilled when you get a Dan Mullen in there. But, Zach Arnett he seemed to just really be my way or the highway kind of guy. And when you don't have any head coaching experience, that's maybe not the best attitude to have. So, I think that he's going to be a hot name for defensive coordinator somewhere this offseason. Let's say Glenn Schumann gets a job somewhere as a head coach at Georgia. Let's say like Dan Lanning poaches or Lincoln Riley poaches Will Muschamp or someone from Georgia. Zach Arnett is a talented enough defensive coordinator that he could have success with a top tier program like Georgia, like an Ohio State, like a Florida, any of these playoff contenders, he would be a great coordinator for. He's just not ready to be a head coach yet, and he might not be there. He just might not be a head coach. I mean, you saw just the way that he came in and just completely revamped an already successful system. That's not a sign of good leadership.
Yeah, especially when you are the guy that was there. I mean,
Right.
it's not like you were a brand new guy coming out from the outside. You were a defense coordinator last year, so you knew what was there, what was working. So we'll see. We'll see how the Mississippi State goes about their coaching search. There should be some other coaches moving forward too. We may hear in this conversation, but SEC Week 11 on paper going, yes, okay, these are some interesting games. We didn't have any that come down to the wire. They were all double. I guess maybe the best game of the weekend was the Florida LSU game. That was probably the closest contest. Just what were your overall takeaways from Week 11?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was more of an individual effort kind of week. I mean, we saw, start with my guy Cody Schrader from Mizzou. 200 rushing yards, 100 receiving yards. Just every time he touches the ball, just runs like his life depends on it. He's awesome to watch. He's been just a great find for Eli Drinkwitz and that staff from the D2 ranks. Just incredible. Probably going to win the SEC rushing title this year. Just what a find that was. Jaden Daniels, man, I have him number one in my Heisman race right now. I don't care what LSU's record is. I saw something today. He's had 76 plays of 20 or more yards. Michael Penix Jr. is second with 57.
Wow,
So he has 19 more 20+ yard plays than everybody else. And Caleb Williams is third at 55. And that's just insane how explosive of a player he's become since his days at Arizona State. And then I think I saw too that that's more 20-yard plus plays than like 130 out of 133 FBS teams combined. Like it's crazy what he's doing. So that was an insane individual performance. We talked earlier about Jalen Milroe. Every week it seems like he's setting a record. Brock Bowers coming back from his surgery and catching a touchdown. Like what a tough guy he is. So I thought Week 11 was more about individual performances rather than teams. Because you're right, like every single game was, when all was said and done, was kind of a blowout.
I know one game, of course, over at Last Run College Football, I cover Auburn, and I went in there. I thought Auburn could beat Arkansas if they play like like they've been playing. I did not see 48-10. And I mean, yeah, Auburn's playing a lot better, but that says a lot about Arkansas where they're going too. But on the Auburn side of things, what have you made of year one of Hugh Freeze? You started 3-0, but it didn't really look that good, and you lose 4 in a row, which I think if you go preseason, no one would have been shocked if they lost those 4 games. Just kind of how they lost a couple of them, and now they've won 3 in a row, which against teams that don't have great records, but now they sit at 6-4. Will probably be on a 4-game winning streak going into the Iron Bowl after they play New Mexico State.
Yeah, I think that this is a really good job by Hugh Freeze. The previous coaching staffs would have, maybe lost the team a little bit after that losing streak, but they've stayed the course. And I mean, this is year one of Hugh Freeze. He's going to get the guys in there that he wants in there in the future. But finishing, even if they lose the Iron Bowl, and you never know what's going to happen in the Iron Bowl. Auburn always makes that thing interesting, even when they have no business making it interesting. So that's watch out for that game. But even if they finish the regular season 7-5, that's great for Hugh Freeze's first year. That's incredible. That's something that every single member of the Tigers should be proud of if they finish 7-5 this year and go to a bowl game with a chance to get win number 8. That's a building block, and that's something that should make boosters happy. That's something that should have people excited for the future. Then it's time, if you're Hugh Freeze, get in that transfer portal and find yourself a quarterback. Don't have this thing turn into Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M where you can't find your quarterback, or you find a guy that's just good enough that you have to stick with him. No, find your star, and if your star is not good enough, then go find somebody else. Do what Lane Kiffin did at Ole Miss and bring in, a veteran starter to push your incumbent if need be. Bring in 2 transfers to battle it out. Do whatever you have to do to find the guy. Get some wide receivers in there too, because if you have a better quarterback, you need to upgrade this receiving core too. But 7-5, great work from Hugh Freeze if that's what their record ends up being. Just even getting to a bowl game this year, really solid effort, and then you can start to increase the expectations heading into 2024.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always wild when the Iron Bowl's at Jordan-Hare. That's another thing.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, being around a bunch of Alabama fans, they do not like it when they always get nervous when they go to Jordan-Hare. It's like that place has got like the Voodoo Stadium. That's just all it is at Jordan-Hare. And you're right. Auburn has won games at Jordan-Hare, not just Alabama. They had no business winning. They just had no business winning, and they somehow were able to pull it out. Well, Alabama, of course, now they have clinched the West, and they will be playing Georgia, who's clinched the East. And I know jumping ahead a few weeks, like I said, Alabama still has to go to Auburn. Who knows? I mean, Georgia's kind of got a little, Tennessee this week, and then they have Georgia Tech after that. But just look, kind of look, especially from the Alabama side of things. Is that a matchup too? Do you see as like a close game as you look at it a few weeks away, where Alabama as a team now you think okay they can compete and they can perhaps be that team to dethrone Georgia?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, I think that the way that that defense is playing right now is just it's elite and just something that any team is going to not want to go up against. You know, I think that it has the chance to be a very similar style of game to what Mizzou and Georgia just played. You know, I'm not necessarily comparing Mizzou and Alabama, but you know the quarterbacks are similar. You know, Brady Cook can make plays with his leg and his arms. You know, he's a very talented dual threat quarterback. You know, Mizzou has better wide receivers and running back. Cody Schrader, obviously, we talked about him earlier. But Alabama's defense is significantly better than Mizzou's, and Mizzou's is a good defense, but Alabama's is at another level. So, you know, you look at that, you maybe shave a few points off of that Georgia Mizzou game, and I think that that's sort of the style of game that because Georgia can play whatever style of game you need, and if you know, and we still have like 3 weeks for Brock Bowers to continue to get healthier ahead of that game. So I mean that's going to be just a lot of fun to watch, and I expect it to be really close because I mean it's basically like you know it's basically like an early playoff game. So you know
Yeah.
those might honestly be the two best teams in the country. You know Nick Saban has a point every year. You know if Alabama, let's say Alabama loses the SEC championship game to Georgia by 1 point, you know they probably won't get into the playoff. But I mean, if that ends up being the case, I mean that is absolutely you have to say Alabama is one of the best four teams in the country, and they'd probably be left at home, and it would probably drive Nick Saban crazy once again. But you know, he has a point when he says stuff like that. But yeah, I think that we are going to get a really really good game, one of the best games of the year in Atlanta and on December 2nd.
And I just kind of wonder in the next couple of weeks, Jalen Milroe, of course, they're playing Chattanooga this week, and he has a big game against Auburn, running, throwing, and everybody's going because it's flashy with the way he does it. Aside Carson Beck, he's put up big numbers, good numbers this year, but it's not necessarily flash number. He just does. He plays within the offense. He gets the job done. He's got over 3,000 yards passing. I just got to wonder going into that one, maybe Carson Beck's going to end up being the one with a little chip on his shoulder. So, hey, I know y'all talking about Jalen Milroe, just throwing a scenario out there, but, I'm pretty good too, and he's played really good this year.
Yeah, I mean, he just had a masterful performance against Ole Miss. I mean, man, you know, they just absolutely dominated that game from start to, not from start to finish, but once it was like halfway through the first quarter and it was 14-14 and Georgia's like, okay, enough of this. And then, you know, Beck and the offense took off, the defense tightened up. It was a master class for the last 3.5 quarters there. You know, so I think that's sort of yeah, I think you're right that like Carson Beck has that in him to have that elite performance, and you know that's he's just never faced a defense this year quite like Alabama's, and that's going to change. But you know he's talented enough to still put up some numbers. I just don't think he's going to drop 52 or whatever it was on Alabama.
Yeah, I don't either. If he does, maybe he needs to be invited to the
Yeah,
Heisman ceremony
exactly.
if that happens in Atlanta. The final time we'll have the SEC on CBS for the SEC championship game too. But
Yeah.
it's going to be fun. Kind of hope we can hurry up and get through week 12. I know you don't like to rush through the season, but this is always the worst weekend of SEC
Mhm.
football every single year. But then we get the rivalry weekend, so it'll be worth the wait. But Adam, it's been a lot of fun having you on the show, talking all things SEC football. If the listeners and viewers want to check out, where can they find you on the work you're doing?
Yeah, just check out Saturday Down South. You know, we're hammering all the news on the football side. We're gearing up basketball. You know, Saturday football newsletter is going to be important down the stretch, and then you know, I'm on Twitter at Adam Spencer 4.
All right, sounds good, Adam. I appreciate the time, and I look forward to doing this again sometime down the road.
Sounds good. Talk to you later.